Good morning again. I'm back for another constitutional talk. And I think today I want to go back into section 1 and get into discussion about redistricting. We just went through a process of redistricting. And what we have today is we have parties fighting it out to see who they get to represent. But I just want you to see and understand what the purpose is. And so let me read this section we're talking about. It's fairly lengthy, which is why I haven't memorized it for you. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may include within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years. In other words, indentured servants, and excluding Indians, not taxed. Indians are not taxed because they are members of sovereign Indian nations. So therefore, they are not American citizens. 3/5 of all other persons. Now, I want to really get you to understand this 3/5 idea, because this isn't saying that they're 3/5 of a person. This is saying for the purpose of taxation, we're going to count them as 3/5. The reason we are taxing the states is so the states have funds to pay the president's salary, the House members, and the Senate salaries, because they don't want states paying their salaries, because they want those people loyal to the country, not the state from which they came. Okay, now I'll go on here. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of Congress of the United States. So they're ordering an exact enumeration of these people. In other words, a census. So they're going to call for a census within 3 years. And within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. The number of the representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least 1 representative, and until such enumeration shall be made, and they then lo upon listing the states, and they give temporary representatives until such census is taken. Now, the purpose of redistricting is so that each district within a state has basically the same number of representatives as every other. So let's just take Virginia as an example. You don't have one guy representing 10,000, another guy representing 120,000, and somebody else representing 50, and then 80. So they wanted the same basic number so that everybody is equal within the state. Each representative is equal. Now, Mr. Gary, or sometimes known as Jerry, and he's famous for gerrymandering, okay? He was governor, I think it was during 1810, when the census was taken up in Massachusetts. And he signed a bill into law, a redistricting bill, that showed a district that looked much like a salamander. It started at the bottom and just kind of swept around. It was in the shape of a salamander. Well, the newspapers just had a heyday. These districts that he had signed gave extra power to the Republican Party, I believe, which was in power up there at the time. So he had used the mapping process to give his party more power. And this is the whole problem with redistricting and the way some states will redistrict, because they'll look at ways to give their party an advantage. And in other states, you have the same thing going on. And I don't dispute that one state can be swaying one way and one state the other. But I think what our founders really wanted was districts that would be fair to everyone. We were electing people that would represent us. It was not the idea that they would represent a party. It was an idea that they would represent the people. The House of Representatives was meant to be different than the Senate. The Senate was to be chosen from the state houses and to represent their state. It was never meant to represent the people. The House of Representatives, the people's house, was there to represent the people. And this redistricting process was important because as shifts in population occur, one state might wind up with more representatives than another state because the entire house is based on population. So if you lose a representative and maybe that representative goes down to, maybe it goes from New York to Alabama, well, now Alabama has more than it had before, so all of that has to be redivided. New York would be slightly less in that scenario. These districts were not for partisan gain. They were meant to make it as equal as possible. But just as everything else, party politics has corrupted the process. And that's why I continually point to Washington's farewell address and discussing the dangers of political parties. It really shouldn't be a power struggle. The people should be fairly represented across the board. Gerrymandering was not a good thing. It still is not a good thing. And for all that Gary did, it's too bad that his name has the stigma of gerrymandering. He was an important figure. He was important in Congress. In the Constitutional Congress, he was a very, very important person. And I believe it was Washington said something along the lines of, if every man was a Jerry, liberty would be safe. And that's how important this man was. But at the end of the convention, and he is not here, even though he was here, but he's not in our painting because he refused to sign. He's one of the 3 great dissenters that we had. And he didn't sign the document, citing that he felt that it would create a civil war in Massachusetts because one party was so much for democracy, which he thought was the scourge of all governing systems. And the other party, he said, was the opposite. And he was worried that if he signed it, it would create a great civil war. Just wanted to get an idea of what redistricting is supposed to do. It shouldn't always be a huge fight. But redistricting is important. We go through it every 10 years. And the census has lots of information in there that can be used by all kinds of genealogists and people trying to sort out, who has what in there. There's a lot of information in there. Information on the amount of cattle you may have, where your parents came from. There's a lot of information in there. So the census is a very important tool, but it was never meant to be used the way it is today. Taxation of the states was important so that the states would be fairly represented and people that were sent would not be as that heavily devoted to the state itself, but to the overall country. I hope you get that, and I'll be glad to see you again next week on the next Constitution Talk. Folks, have a good day. I'll see you then. Bye.